Good morning. Welcome back to the brand new season of Live Well with aromatherapist Jerby Ko. So for this season, we will be opening conversations about mental health or anything that talks about wellness beyond intentional aromatherapy. So for today's episode, it's the 1st of August, we will be having Erin McCullough. Erin McCullough has been helping business owners for 16 years to create impenetrable internal sense of joy so that they can be calm, have peace of mind, and find meaning in their lives. She's passionate in helping people overcome and prevent anxiety, worry, and feelings of overwhelm. Everybody, please welcome the Joy Slinger, Erin McCullough. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
Thank you so much for being here on my podcast. I just want to dive right in. So, what led you to have this predominant experience of joy in your life?
Well, it was several things that led to it. I think just like everybody's life, there's a lot of defining moments that happen. And for me, there was three. One was an anxiety disorder that I created through talk therapy with a counselor. Not to say that there's anything wrong with talk therapy. It's just what my person decided to do with that information. And it was through the process of telling my trauma over and over again that I created an anxiety disorder, which was started with panic attacks that became debilitating to the point where I was not able to leave my house. It started there, but I just like life. It just, life is, it doesn't all happen at once. It happens in, moments, and they add up. And for me, I created that because of the not wanting to deal with the emotions that were attached to the trauma. And so I was referred to a homeopathic psychiatrist who gave me a remedy. And within 20 minutes after taking that remedy, the chemistry piece of my anxiety disorder was gone. The mental, emotional, spiritual piece, not so much. So I recreated that, and I decided I'd move to a small town. And in that small town, I would live this simple life where I would not get triggered or have anxiety or stress or any of those things. Come to find out that you can create that anywhere because it lives inside you. It's not about the things that are happening in your life. It's about how are you navigating this life. And so I moved to a small town in Hawaii, paradise, and I created the same thing all over again. I started a business and it took off like gangbusters. And it was super stressful and I had a lot of anxiety. And then about 10 years in, I had another defining moment, which was a client had called and she was really upset. And I told her I'd be right there. And I raced over to my friend's house to drop my kiddo off so I could go deal with that. And in doing that, I backed into my friend's driveway and I sideswiped my car on her husband's truck, which there was no damage to his truck. But I found out later that he was under the truck working on it and it was on stilts and he thought it was going to land on him and kill him or hurt him. And I just decided at that moment that this is not the way to live life, to be so frantic that you're, nearly creating accidents that are life-threatening. And so I delved into self-development. I started going to seminars and reading books and started to make some changes in my life, and things started to feel a little less heavy. And then I found myself in a divorce that sort of leveled me. And I thought, gosh, I'd spent all this money and all this time doing self-development. And here I was in one of my darkest times, and I didn't have any actual strategies that I could use to get out of this feeling and this space. And so I picked up this book. Maybe you've heard of it. It's called A Course in Miracles. So this book it has 365 passages, and it's meant to be a passage a day for a year. And so I would go, I decided I'm going to go to the beach every morning. I'll read a passage and just, sit with it and decide what I think of it. And I thought it was okay for the first month. And then the second month, something like very strange happened. I would open up the book and I would look at the passage, and I kept getting the same message. It was, the path is joy. The answer is joy. I just kept seeing joy, joy, joy. And I literally one day like raised my arms in the air and was like, okay, I get it. It's joy. But how do I get to that? How do I make that happen in my life? And then a series of things happened. I went to a seminar by a gentleman I'd met years before, sight unseen. I didn't really even know what it was about. And it turns out it was about this visualization process that he teaches. And I went home so excited about it. And I started using it, and everything in my life just lined up. My business that had been for sale for 9 months, finally, with no interest prior to, went into a bidding war and went into escrow. And I met the love of my life through these very interesting circumstances. And then I found my purpose because I went back and I trained under the gentleman that taught the visualization to teach his regular seminar. And I came home and put on that seminar. And in the seminar, like 5 minutes in, it was like I got this download of all the things that I had ever been through and learned. It all just came into being. And I went, oh my gosh, this is my purpose. I'm supposed to teach people how to find their joy and cultivate it daily. So that's their predominant experience. And so that's what I've been doing for the last 4 years.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, from you having all those struggles and then eventually overcoming it. And now I know that you have been coaching a lot of people for the past 16 years and helping them to encapsulate joy, discover joy in their lives. But I just also want to ask, what is the difference between happiness and joy? How can we distinguish one from the other?
To me, the difference between happiness and joy is that happiness is based on something external. It's, things. It's like, oh, I got a new car. That's so exciting. Or I got a new house, or I got a promotion. And that's outside of yourself. And while it is exciting when those things happen, it's not lasting. It's not long lasting. And it's not something that you can exactly cultivate the experience of every single day just by, getting another thing or, amassing, things and money. Joy, on the other hand, has the same nuances of excitement and, jumping up and down. It has that, but it has other things too, like stillness and calm and peace of mind. That's where your mind is not racing all the time. It can be quiet and you can be in the present moment. And those sorts of things you can actually cultivate and create day in, day out, regardless of what your life looks like. You can start that process now and experience it now.
Wow, that's amazing. But I just want to also go back. You mentioned about visualization. Could you please guide us on the visualization process? How do we do that exactly? Is it like manifesting or mind setting?
Yeah, so it is. Okay, so I'll teach you the visualization that I teach, and I'll explain why it's so important. So the visualization I teach is really what I ask people to do is to write out the day in the life of everything they ever wanted, starting from moment wake up until moment go to sleep. And that includes everything, right? That's all the material things, but also like the relationships. And then you want to really include all the feels, right? What does that look like, taste like, smell like, sound like, all the things, right? Because you want this to be a dynamic. I mean, if it's a day in the life of everything you ever wanted, that's pretty exciting. And you want to be excited, right? And so in that story that you create, you take that story and create a visualization of it. And a visualization is a mental movie of whatever it is that you are thinking is your day in the life. And in that mental movie, you actually are in it. You're not the camera. It's you going throughout all of the day, doing all the things and spending time with the people and having purpose and meaning and all the things that matter. And none of that, so it's all outcome based, right? So none of the how am I going to have all this? And, was it my business? Was it, an inheritance? Did I win the lottery? None of that, just outcome based. Like, what is it like to have everything I ever wanted? And so you did hit on something. So, wow, this is not for the purpose of manifesting. It is also how you can manifest. But the purpose, from my estimation, from my vantage point, that I think is the most important and where I found my joy is in the elevated emotional experience of the visualization. So I'll give you an example. In my visualization, when I first started, I had kind of a hard time, shutting my mind down and trying to like zone in on the things that I wanted to create in that day. Then I started realizing I could move my body, and in moving my body, then it created emotional experience. So I would literally raise my arms in the air and go, yes, that's happening. And that's happening. And oh my gosh, I can't believe that's happened. Right. And I would get goosebumps. And by the end of my visualization, I was so entrenched in it. I had tears of joy streaming down my face. And that's when I realized, like I can be in joy now because we want all those things that we say that we want because of how we think we're going to feel when we have them. And I'm asking you to create that environment now before you get all those things, because we were taught that, if you'll believe it when you see it. And in manifesting, it's the opposite. It's see it first. Then it becomes real. And so you have a dual purpose going on here. You're having an elevated emotional experience of joy, and you're setting the stage or the environment for these things to come into your life.
Wow, that's very correct. I mean, I think that technique or strategy is has been very helpful, especially for all of us who has just went through this pandemic. I mean, it's still going on, especially here in the Philippines. It's not yet that as stable as how it is there. But, I recognize that stress and anxiety is at its all-time high. What other strategies can you share with our audience on how they can manage stress, anxiety, and feelings of overwhelm and worry?
So I think, I always start with clients with their story, right? Because, the story of all the things that happened that weren't fair or didn't feel good, because even though, we may be adults now, I mean, I don't think it's a stretch to recognize that past experiences create future experiences. And so we bring that story with us along the way. And for my purposes, the quicker you can create some space between that story and you, the better. Because the story, from my vantage point, is not as interesting as we'd all like to believe. The thing about that story is it's not about the people or what exactly happened. I think it's about what you decided about yourself because of that story. And so when you can recognize that, all us humans sort of had the same experience of, our story, and it was things like, I'm not good enough, I don't deserve, I'm not worthy, I'm not lovable, things like that. You can imagine if you made that decision at a young age, that you're still sort of taking that along the way. And when you can recognize that that's going on behind the scenes by getting further from that story and understanding things like, you aren't your story. That was just something that happened for the purpose of your growth as a human, your evolution. And other things like, you are not your thoughts, the thoughts that, from that story, like I'm not good enough, those thoughts, they're not who you actually are. And the emotions that you created because of those experiences, those actually aren't who you are either. Those create a roller coaster ride of events in our life. But how I know you're not those things is because you can have a thought and you can have an emotion and you can name your story and tell me what those things are. So who is that that's naming? If you were those things, then you wouldn't be able to separate yourself from that. But the fact that you can tell me about it, and you can express an emotion or a thought, that tells me there's something else at play here. So that's who you actually are, is the namer, is the spectator of those things. And so what I teach people is how to become that spectator in a way that they can understand that these past experiences are what's shaping, how we're making decisions, how we're in relationship with people. And some of them serve us quite well. We've done quite well for ourselves. Some of them, not so much. And those are the ones that we want to take a look at and try and navigate a little bit differently. So foundationally, that's what I'm after, is to get separation from the story, separation from the thoughts, and separation from the emotions. Not so that you don't have emotions. We want to have emotions, but we don't want to wallow in them, and we don't want to get stuck in these cycles of things that don't feel good, because we are meant to feel good mostly. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. And with that regard, I wanted also to talk about resiliency, especially like it has been a buzzword also in the past a year and a half because of the pandemic. But how can you stay okay and functional if you feel that, you feel that life has been beating you left and right? Sometimes it's just hard, right? For some people, don't you think it's hard to stay resilient and be okay if there's just so many things that's going on around you?
Yeah, I mean, I totally get it. There certainly was a lot going on with like every aspect of our lives, right? For us parents, we had kids that were home. We still had to do work, and then on top of it, I think humans' biggest fear is death. So, it doesn't get any more real than a pandemic, right? And so I think that just triggered a lot of people into sort of chaotic thinking and emotions and, overwhelm, anxiety, all these things. And I like to just explain my definition of those things, because I think through my definition, you may understand it a little differently. So to me, anything that's like a low level experience emotionally, like anxiety, stress, overwhelm, worry, depression, those sorts of things, they're all the same. They're this wanting to control people or circumstances, and then at the same time having their unconscious recognition that you aren't able to. And so that dissonance is what's creating the ill feeling or feelings, right? Is wanting to control, right? Because we want, everybody to show up. If you say these words or these things and show up this way for me, then I get to feel good. But if you don't, then I get to feel angry or upset or disappointed, right? Mm-hmm. But when we recognize that we are responsible for our emotions and they are completely ours, and that nobody else can make us feel anyway, or no thing else can make us feel anyway, then we go from lack, which is the pandemic, that person, that circumstance made me upset, angry, anxious, whatever, depressed, to these things happen. The pandemic definitely happens, still happening. People are still going to be themselves. They're going to show up however they show up, and circumstances are still not going to go the way we want them to. And we get to decide. So those things happened. And while I feel this way, anxious, worried, whatever, I get to own it. I get to look inside me. The journey is inside versus outside. That made me feel this way. These things happened and I feel this way. So I'm going to go inside. So that's the difference. That is responsible and empowered, or I'm empowered because I recognize that I'm having an emotional reaction to whoever or whatever. And I get to own that and go inside and go, oh, and try and reconcile that with myself versus trying to get everybody else and everything else to fit into what makes sense for me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, wow, that's very beautiful and meaningful. And you mentioned about triggers. So, what is trigger avoidance and how can it be bad for us?
Well, I mean, I hate to break it to everybody, but we're in trigger avoidance all the time. Like literally all that we do is to avoid emotion. And it's not our fault. Nobody taught us that that's not how it's supposed to be, because from a young age, kids fall down, they hurt themselves. You're like, oh, okay, honey, you pick them up. It's okay. Don't cry, So we're just stuffing down emotions and learning how to not experience them. I don't know if it's out of fear or just how it's always been. But unfortunately and fortunately, the way through to healing and growth is to experience the emotion. So, as scary as that may sound to a lot of people, because we are spending so much time trying to avoid them with all of the things, right? The obvious things are like, drugs and alcohol and gambling, sex, shopping, social media, right? Binge watching movies and TV and all those ways to get out of our body, to just not have to feel and not have to think about the things that aren't working out and all of that. And there's even more subtle ones like helicopter parenting, where we, put our kids first and we don't allow ourselves to have a life. And this other one that's huge, at least here, this like badge of honor. I'm so busy. My schedule is so packed. I have so much going on. It's like, clients come to me and they say that. And I say, why? And they think I'm crazy. And I say, do all of those things bring you joy? Are they bringing you meaning and purpose in your life? If they are not, it is another tactic to not experiencing emotions. And so that's the same as this trigger avoidance. It's the same thing. I want to try and cushion my life so that I don't have to feel anything. And the other way that we try to cushion our life is through this idea of when I have enough money, when I have enough things, when I have the car and the social status or the work or business status. Or, I've got that promotion, or I'm sitting as the VP of whatever, or CEO, or, all these labels that we use to create this idea of security. And I hate to break it to people, but there is no security. I mean, if this last year taught us anything, literally there's like everything's up for grabs all the time. And that's not meant to scare you. That's meant for you to learn how to navigate that differently so that you're not beholden to it anymore. So you can make decisions based on what feels good versus, keeping up with the Joneses or what everybody else or society thinks is the thing. You can begin to make decisions about your life now and enjoying it now.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm very guilty of that bit where you mentioned that we always keep ourselves busy. I always declare that I am busy, and I'm very guilty, very much guilty of that. But don't you think that the social media also played a big role with all of these feelings of discontent, of us trying to compare ourselves with our neighbors or with our friends, trying to achieve, trying to one up another?
Absolutely. I think, social media, I don't think it's bad. I just think that, some of those beliefs we were talking about, like I'm not good enough, I don't deserve, those things are heavy at play in social media, right? Because people aren't posting, they're not posting like my life is awful and these things aren't going my way, right? They're posting the highlights of their life, right? and we don't get to see the low lights. And so it's one-sided. And so then we begin to question ourselves and go, wait, they're having all this success. How come I'm not? Or what's wrong with me that I can't create the same thing that they are? And I'm here to tell you that it's a lie. Like, most people are not having that experience. They're sharing the happy things, not because they're trying to rub it in anybody's face, but I think because they feel like, who wants to talk about the stuff that's not going well? Like, some people do. And sometimes I see a lot of oversharing on social media. And I think, wow, this is a really interesting platform for you to like put your heart out there for everybody to, do whatever they're going to do with it. And, everybody has to decide where they feel most comfortable in this, but recognize that, not every minute of everybody's day is, spectacular and, to the nth degree successful and all the things. It's just that they don't think that posting real life things is interesting.
Mm-hmm. So, how can you help people who constantly feel that they have to compete with another? Because if you have that feeling all the time, I think it's impossible or hard for you to find joy, right? So, what is your advice to stressfully competitive or intoxicatingly competitive people?
Yeah, I think we have to decide, what is acceptable for ourselves. I'm constantly preaching about this idea of sufficiency, which, for me it's not about not having all the things. I mean, I love stuff too. I just know that it doesn't bring me like true joy. It brings me a little bit of happiness here and there and some comfort. But in the long run, it doesn't make a difference, And so when we can reconcile within ourselves what we think is enough for us, then we don't have to keep up with other people. And when we can recognize this idea of sufficiency is not saying that I don't want more, or I don't want to achieve more, or I don't want to have goals, or I don't want to go after things. It's that what's happening right now is pretty delicious. There's lots of things going just right in our lives. And often we spend a lot of time concentrating on that, handful or less of things that aren't going well. And so, and then we go to social media, we spend a lot of time, we keep checking in, and we think, oh, well, that piece of my life that is not going swimmingly right at the moment, this other person is having success in. There must be something wrong with me. But if you decide that you're going to navigate social media in a way that is useful, and there's plenty of ways to do that by looking at memes that are positive or inspirational, or following people who say positive or inspirational things, and or I love the reels. Like, once a day I go in there and I just laugh for at least 15 minutes about, crazy stuff that's going on, right? So in that way, it's super positive. This comparing thing is really just about, I'm not good enough. When we recognize, and it's also about lack, which is, there's not enough, right? So it's the opposite of sufficiency. There is enough. There's enough going on in my life right now. There's enough going right in my life right now. I have enough. I have shelter. I have food. I have access to water and the things, right? Even if you don't have those things that I just spoke about, there are still things. Nature is free. Other people, smiling at other people, free, right? All these things that can be cultivated all day, every day, that don't rely on these ideas of success and making money and all this, it's like a no-win game. Not against making money. Make tons and tons of money. I'm all for it. Just recognize again that that's not going to change how you feel about this world. It may change where you live, and it may change what you drive, but it's not going to change the inside piece. And that's the piece that generates what feels good. And so when we recognize that, then when we have a reaction to things like social media, we can look to ourselves and go, oh, where am I in the lacking piece that I think there's not enough for them to be successful on their journey, how they've done, and for me to be successful in what I call success on my journey and how I'm doing things. And so there is no comparison because we're all in different places doing different things with different circumstances.
Yeah, I agree. I like the bit that you mentioned. It's not about being complacent, but it's about being contentment, right? And I guess what the past year and a half has taught me is to be grateful, like what you've mentioned, to recognize that what you have, the simple things that you have. You don't really have to have like a grand life, the latest car, latest whatever. Even being healthy, not sick, is enough for us to be happy and grateful for surviving and living the past year, right? And
Yes.
I just wanted also to know, like, how do we heal and grow from the challenges in our lives? Like, do you have any strategies for that?
So for me, healing and growth is a 4-step process, right? It starts with awareness, which often comes in crisis. Like all of a sudden, you just can't do it anymore, right? It's like too much. I've reached the threshold of what I'm willing to navigate pain-wise, and now I need to do something different, right? So we get to that threshold. And then there's the piece involved with that, which is the emotional awareness, which is the unpacking and recognition of when we are in reaction to people or circumstances. So that's, when am I angry? When am I happy? When am I sad? Why do I feel this particular way right now? So that's step 1, is just awareness, emotional awareness. Step 2 is intention. So a lot of the time we talk about what we don't want. So it's like, oh, I don't want to be stressed out anymore. I don't want to have anxiety. And it's good to recognize the not want, but then to shift that intention into what is the want so that you can move the energy in the right direction. So that would be, I would like to live my life in ease. I would like to have peace of mind or be calm, right? So that would be the intention. The third piece are strategies. Like, how can I use mindfulness strategies? How can I retrain my brain to recognize when I'm having an emotional experience or reaction that doesn't feel good, anything low level, and see what is happening before it, during it? Check in with your body. Like, what's going on in my body? Where does that live? Because for my purposes, there's literally like a border here. So this is the head piece that's thinking all the thoughts and having all the emotions. But the body piece is present moment. So when we have an emotional reaction and we can get into the body instead of getting into the head and going down the rabbit hole of all the bad things, right? Oh, this happened, that's bad. And then there are all these other things that aren't working out in my life, right? Like how we like to go down that whole thing. Instead of that, we go, oh, I don't feel good right now. Let me check in with my body. Where does it live? Oh, it feels like it's in my gut, right? Or my heart area or my throat, right? Throat is like, I don't have a voice. I'm not being heard. Heart is, broken heart, relationship oriented. And the gut is, intuition, like, oh, you have that gut feeling, right? And so when you can just sit in those areas and go, and so the path through to actual growth is to recognize the emotion, become the spectator or the private investigator of what's going on for me that I'm in reaction right now. What did somebody say or what happened or do? How am I feeling at this moment? Am I trying to go down a rabbit hole of all the bad things? Where is it living in my body so I can be in the present moment? Because in the present moment, you cannot have both, low level experiences and high level experiences. And so when we get into the body, we can start to get separateness and recognize, that's what's going on right now. I'm having a reaction. This reaction is based on my past. Interesting. And then we do it with interest, with curiosity, right? And not judgment, just like, oh, that's so interesting that I'm angry right now. That's so interesting that I'm jealous right now. It's so interesting that I'm feeling sadness right now. I wonder what that is, just for the purpose of recognizing it. And we want to recognize it so we can see it coming from a mile away. This way, we're no longer surprised when these things happen. It's not all of a sudden I'm angry or upset or sad. It's like, oh yeah, it's that thing again. There's that thing again. Somebody said, it's very similar to that last thing that somebody said, and I had this reaction. Interesting, right? And we get curious about it, not so that we can find it and who's at fault or any of that. It's just, ooh, what's going on for me, right? That's that responsible stance. What's happening to me? This happened. What's going on with me? And so you get into that space and you get into your body and you get into present moment. And then it's the last piece is the practice of that over and over again until you create new norms, right? So we learn how to sit in our emotions. We don't cover them up with alcohol or TV or social media or making our kids come first or being busy. We just go, oh, I'm having an emotional reaction. I sit with it. I recognize it. I contemplate about it. I get curious. Like, why is that here? That's interesting. I sit in my body. Where is it in my body? I just sit with it. And then every time that happens, we do that. And through that process, we heal all those emotions. We don't tamp them down anymore. We don't just go, oh, that didn't feel good. Can't wait to get home and have a glass of wine. Can't wait to, run home and watch my new series on Netflix or whatever, right? We just go, oh, I had that experience. And then you don't need all those things. You don't need alcohol or drugs or being super busy or over exercising or, all the things that we do to distract ourselves. You don't need them anymore because there's nothing to distract from, because we're experiencing the emotion and then we're letting it go. And it just goes. I'm not saying don't wallow in it. You can't anyway. Once you get into your body, your present moment, and you can't wallow in it any longer if you're being in that moment. And so that to me is the process of healing and growth. And that is why we are here. It is our birthright to experience our life in joy. And the only way to experience it is to feel the emotions and let them go versus what we've been doing, which is tamping them down and trying to avoid them at all costs.
Wow, I really liked what you said that, sometimes when we are so much into our emotions, we just let the emotion overcome us. And I like that bit when you said you have to peel yourself away from the situation, be the third person, observing what's going on and recognizing all those feelings and being curious about it, why it's happening and all. But I'm just curious as well, Erin. Have you ever had a client who has had a hard time doing that? Because that's the first process until you reach that point, until that you're able to recognize those feelings, or until that you're able to peel yourself away from that. I don't think you can ever move forward. So my question is, have you ever met someone who's struggled to do that first step?
Certainly. I mean, most people, by the time people get to me, they are in some sort of crisis in their life. They're, just can't do whatever the thing is anymore. And they're desperate enough to hear new information. See, we're stubborn, and our brain, it's not exactly our fault. Our subconscious mind does not want change at all. Like, it is only interested in survival. And so when we introduce new things, new actions, new thoughts, new emotional experiences, and a way to navigate those, it is uninterested. So you have you have your subconscious mind in resistance, right? Then we have our, family and friends, that while they would love for you not to be this depressive person or this downer or whatever, when you start to change, all of a sudden they have to start looking at their own stuff and go, oh my gosh, then they don't want you to change, right? Resistance again. And then society would love you to believe that, keep going after the money and the cars and the houses and the relationships and all those things outside of yourself, because that's what makes, whatever, the economy work, or, our society work. And so there's resistance. But I'll tell you, when you get super clear that you are not going to live your life that way anymore, if you can be consistent enough, you won't do it every time, because this is many years in the making, right? We practice this other way so many years, right? So it's new. It's like going to the gym. You got to go and you got to show up at least 3 times a week. And, are you going to make the mark every time? Absolutely not. So, you just try to be steadfast. You just try to go, oh, okay, there, I did it again. That thing I didn't want to do, I did it again. And just be lighthearted about it. Don't be down on yourself. You're learning. It's new stuff and it's challenging. You got resistance within. You got resistance all around you. Of course, it can be difficult to navigate. In terms of people that are coming to me, I know when they can't fully engage with me that they're just not ready. They haven't crossed the threshold of I'm willing to do what I need to no longer feel that pain. And when they haven't got that far yet, I say, I bless them and I let them on their way. And I say, if there's anything I can do to help you, please, I'm here. My door's always open. All I want is the best for you. And when they're ready, it might not be this lifetime, but it might be, then they'll come back. Otherwise, they're just not ready yet. There is a threshold that we must cross before we can take in the new information. It has to be painful enough for us to open up and go, okay, there must be a different way to do this, because this way sucks so bad that I can't do it anymore. And unfortunately, that's what it takes. As much as we'd all love to be able to evolve as humans just by knowing intellectual information, we've got to feel it. It's got to be meaningful enough. It's got to hurt enough in order for us to take the steps to make it different.
I agree. Change has to come or has to start from within ourselves before we're able to finally see transition. And I guess the past year and a half, because of the pandemic, a lot of people have suffered in unimaginable ways, like things that they were never prepared of. Like what you've mentioned, like people don't really like change. And this is a big change that there's so much uncertainty about, right? So, what are the common steps that you advise your clients in the past year and a half because of the pandemic to help their mental health?
Well, there's definitely a lot of things. First and foremost, keeping your eyes or ears glued to the news all the time is not good for your mental health.
I agree.
Yeah. And, and that's, it's like, what are you bringing in? What are you taking in, right? If social media is causing you anxiety or, some of the things that we spoke about, then take a break, or take it in small doses, or, communicate with your community in a different way. Find a different way to communicate, It's really important, who we surround ourselves with. I'm not saying that you need to surround you need to like I see a lot of stuff, especially on social media about, I need to put up boundaries because, I can have everybody like stepping on my toes or whatever. And yes, you do have to have boundaries, but it's not like that. Boundaries are not this hard and, it's when you're doing it that way, it's not an actual boundary. That's still a hurt that you're just not navigating. A boundary is where you feel so confident in yourself and what you know is right for you that people cannot. Again, it's so responsible, right? If I'm like setting a boundary to keep you out, then that tells me that you haven't navigated the internal work. When you have the internal work navigated, the boundary is set by your being on your true north. You being, your compass is set for you, not for anybody else or anything else. It's for you. And if somebody does step on your toes, you can politely, without being angry or any of those things, just say, gosh, that didn't feel very good for me. I'll own my experience of it. And this is how I'd like to be treated differently. And it can be just like that. It can be that nice. And it need not be something forceful or, because when we do it that way, then the work just hasn't happened yet. And it's okay. We're on the path. That's why you're starting to even think about boundaries. So wonderful. You're on the way,
Yeah, I agree that, we can't really, I guess, embrace change in a snap. It's like a step at a time, like what you've mentioned, right? If it doesn't go well, it's okay. Just recognize it and then just change it next time. Be better next time. I'm just curious, Erin, like, how does your day normally go? I wanted to inspire everybody's listening. Like, how does Erin's life, like, in the morning when you start your day, how do you think of happy thoughts? Do you, as you make your coffee, what do you do? What is it like for you?
So I have a very specific practice that I start my day with every day. One is a meditation visualization, 30 minutes. That is dedicated to, meditation for me is for the purpose of clearing your mind, to have no thought. And so I put on music that is of interest to me. It doesn't have words. And I clear my mind and allow for no thought to take place. And then I usually have some sort of visualization in terms of something that I'm either wanting to manifest or an experience that I'd like to create for the day, which typically is joy. And so I spend that 30 minutes in quiet. And then I get up and I walk my dog, and that I spend listening to something that speaks to me on a deep level. There are a few people that I regularly listen to so that I can get into the right space, so that I'm holding the space that my clients need, the environment for them to be open and honest with me and tell me all of their things so that I can help them navigate what feels good for them. And that walk is anywhere from a half an hour to an hour. And I consider that a walking meditation because as I'm doing it, I'm not only listening to something that speaks to me on a very deep level, or I like to say speaks to my soul. I'm also in the present moment and I'm connecting with nature. And I'm often, as crazy as this might sound, talking to nature, acknowledging trees, acknowledging flowers, acknowledging other animals, all of that. And then I come home and I make typically I make a smoothie that is super dense in nutrients so that I can prepare my body for the day in a way that makes sense. And then depending on how many clients or what I've got going, I try not to see more than 2 clients a day because I want to be able to hold the space in a way that makes sense. I've seen up to 4 or 5 in a day, and it's totally fine. I need for me to stay in this space of holding the space for them on their journey to joy and understanding their past and reconciling it. I need to be able to have some stillness. And so I practice some of my stillness activities throughout the day to get in the present moment so that I can recharge my batteries and or just get, I don't know how to explain stillness in any other way than just quiet. And that allows me to be intuitive and hear them on a deeper level than just the words that they're saying. It allows me to understand what's going on for them in a deeper way that is sort of the gaps between the words, so to speak. And so, and then I do probably 2 to 5 podcasts a week, because it helps me to solidify what I know is the truth and be of service to people that may not be able to access me otherwise. And the information that I'm sharing, I think, is vitally important. And so it's not that I'm the end all be all. These things I'm talking about, I didn't come up with them. They're just my experience. But some of them I've heard from other people, and it was a recognition on a deeper level. There is a universal knowledge that I feel like I tap into with clients on podcasts. I find that sometimes I feel like I'm just the conduit to the information. It just comes out. And same with the intuition. It's less about, not to sound too woo-woo, but it's less about, what do I know as a human, but what can I hold space for so that information can come through. Because this is not proprietary information that I have. It's just a knowing that I heard from others and pieced together and used in my life. And now I share it with others because it's been so meaningful to me.
Thank you for that. I liked when you said that you start your day by feeding your mental health, like you meditate, and then you feed your soul, and then you feed your body by adding nutrition. You're having your breakfast, nutrition in your life. So it's like a multifaceted recharging yourself first before you're able to give that space, that very zen space to your clients, right? I like that bit where you stressed that you have to take care of yourself first before you can take care of others or give back to others. And I agree with everything that you've said. And don't worry, because I'm sure that this episode resonates to a lot of, to everyone who's listening right now. You've shared so many valuable strategies, information, and personal experience that I'm sure will help everyone to navigate through what's going on right now in the world. So thank you so much for that, Erin. I really loved our episode. I really enjoyed hearing out your experiences and your tips for everyone.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, do you have any projects or announcements or anything that you'd want to invite our audience with?
Well, first, I always like to give a free call. So it's not a sales call. It's just if you want to have a conversation, if there's something that you heard that was interesting to you and you wanted to know a little bit more about it, or you wanted me to share a strategy with you so that you could get on your path to joy, it's a free call. So I hope that people will take me up on it. And the other thing is I have a book coming out. It should, fingers crossed, in the next month, or it'll show up when it's supposed to be here. It's in the editing process right now. It'll be on Amazon. It's called Impenetrable Joy, a guide to calm, peace of mind, and meaning in your life now. And it will highlight the things that I discussed in terms of the process of healing and growth and what that takes. And the back of the book has a bunch of strategies that you can use right away to get on that path. So that'll be out hopefully in the next month.
Wow, congratulations. I will link all of Erin's details, website, and social media on this podcast. And if you have any questions to Erin, don't hesitate to get in touch with her. Book her free call so that you can have a one-on-one session with her. I'm sure it's going to be exciting and fruitful. So thank you so much, Erin, for being on the show today. I really find value in this episode. It's our first episode to talk about mental health.
Oh, nice. Yeah, no, thank you so much. I think it's really important to be able to have platforms where we can discuss important things like this.
Thank you so much, and I hope to see you around.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, so I guess that's all for today. If you have any other ideas or questions or topics that you'd want me to cover in my future podcast episodes, don't forget to shoot me an email at couchwasabi@outlook.com or slip me a DM on my Instagram at jlian85. And I hope to see you on my next Live Well with Aromatherapist, Jerby Ko.